Hi, I'm Michelle Chalfant, psychotherapist, holistic life coach, and human just like you, learning to navigate life's challenges. With over 25 years experience, I teach people how to get healthy using the adult chair model. The adult chair model is where simple psychology meets grounded spirituality, and it teaches us how to become healthy adults. From anxiety and depression to codependency and relationship issues, you can use the adult chair for just about anything. Each week, I share practical tips, tools, and advice from myself and a wide range of experts on how to get unstuck, how to live authentically, and how to truly love yourself, all while sitting in your adult chair. Welcome to the Adult Chair Podcast. So welcome to the Adult Chair Podcast, Yemi Penn.
Thank you very much. So excited to be here.
Does everybody tell you you have the best name ever?
It just flows, doesn't it?
I'm just going to say that, like, rolls off my tongue, like Yemi Penn.
You know, when I got divorced, and I'm going straight in there, I didn't go back to my maiden name because I wanted to have the same name as my kids. And I remember my ex-husband, who I've got a great relationship with, he said, "You just want to keep the name because it flows right, doesn't it?" And I kind of looked at him and said, "Yeah, it does."
It is. And I don't want to just call you Yemi. It's Yemi. It's like, it's both names.
I love that. I just want to pay attention the minute I hear that. Yes.
Well, thank you so much. I was just sharing with you prior to starting the show that it's such an honor. Like, oh my gosh, what you're doing in the world. I'm so glad to have you on the show because people need to hear your message, girl. I'm serious.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
So I love to start, especially with someone like you have so much to tell. Let's hear your story. Like, how did you get here? Tell us everything that you'd like to share.
Oh, how did I get here? I did summarize this for someone the other day because I tend to try to get the title of the Queen of Summary. So let's see how we go. If I give the real answer, I got here because I made a lot of mistakes according to the standards of the world, and got to a point where I was like, you've got to be kidding. We can't keep on hiding about the fact that we didn't get a manuscript or a memo. And I'm just going to live as respectfully, but as openly, as honestly as I can. That genuinely becomes the truth from, an everyday living perspective. But outside of that, if I was to get any more granular and still summarize, it was just, I don't know, this hunger, desire for wanting more, something different. When you just can't feel like, I was born in London, but I grew up in Nigeria. And then we moved back to London. I do university, but, I fall in love with a guy who lives in South Korea at the time.
Oh my God.
We get married. I moved to Japan. So you can already see in my spirit that there is something that's moving. And when I say it out loud, it just sounds like ping pong, but it's actually the soul searching for something. Mm-hmm. I say all of that, but truth of the matter is it was me living life and potentially failing along the way, according to the standards of the world. Mm-hmm. And then settling in Australia 8 years ago, which is the land that has just taken me in and I'm absolutely loving.
I'd love to go to, we're planning to go there. It's just so,
do it.
Yeah.
It's magical. And especially when you connect with the land and the indigenous people, coupled with what others have done to Australia, just divine.
I'm so glad to hear that. Thank you. So if we go back in time, you talk a lot about trauma. I watched your TED Talk, by the way. It's awesome.
Oh,
awesome.
Thank you.
Awesome. You want to tell us about, because I know I really do want to talk about bending your reality, but why do we need to bend our reality?
Yeah.
I know you talk about that, but yeah, what happened? There's so many things I want to talk to you about. My brain's going ping,
ping, ping, ping. Yeah, I can see it. I'm with you. I'm following you the whole way.
You're with me with the ping ponging, right? Like ding, ding, ding. Okay. I feel like we need to start with a little bit of your story, like what maybe the TED Talk, because why do we need to bend our reality? Don't we need to know your story to talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, we do. Absolutely. And let's start with the story and go back to bending reality. Sometimes I wonder what I meant by that, but it does come back very quick. we all have a story, number one. So I'm always conscious when that is put that way, because it then sounds like da-da, like a Netflix Hollywood. And I think we all genuinely do have a story. The one that is dominant for me and has been for the past couple of years is, this incident, and I talk about in my TED talk, and I've made a documentary. I think I'm on my third documentary now, where I talk about, as 7-year-old Yemi, I lost my power. And, I've changed the way I say it, because talking about trauma is delicate, but 7-year-old Yemi lost her power, and it was my sexual power that was taken from me. That's where the abuse happened. And this was from a close family member. And so I speak about that in my TED talk, but I'm also relating it to another form of trauma where a young boy felt really disappointed in himself because he felt he couldn't save his pet, that a bully had somewhat kind of smashed a fishbowl out of his hand, and his pet fish unfortunately died. I just started to get really interested in how we show up in the world, how things that have happened either in our past or in our present completely almost change our whole DNA, our whole thinking. And once again, curious Yemi just thought, why aren't we talking about this? Why is it that we can go into the office, the corporate office, or the regular blue collar, white collar job, and just talk about everything else, building GDP, profit and loss, but no one is talking about the fact that something may have happened yesterday that was extremely traumatic, yet they've just got to put on this cloak and come to work and make that money. I'm curious, and I'm still curious. So I'm using my personal story as a journey. So much that I'm doing a PhD that I'm asking the question, can trauma be transformative? And I'm really curious. And then there's a part of me saying, well, why does it happen? Like, why? It's curious Yemi. Yeah, I think I went all over there, but that's part of my story.
I loved that in your TED talk when you were talking about that little boy. Who was it? Was he in kindergarten? He was
in kindergarten, yeah.
And he was coming in for show and tell, and he had the fish tank bowl. And I'm very visual. So as you're telling the story, I'm visualizing the whole thing. This little 5-year-old is there with his fish, this goldfish. And I'm a goldfish person, so I have goldfish too. And I was like, oh, that's so sweet. He's bringing it in for show and tell. And then the bully comes by and smashes it out of his hand, and the goldfish dies. And obviously his show and tell is ruined. And again, the goldfish dies. For me, that would be traumatic at my age, let alone this little 5-year-old that's like so excited. And then you talked about how it like affected his whole life.
Correct. And his marriage.
Yeah. And he's however old he is now. I don't remember what you said or if you even said it, but it's like these little, we think of them like, oh, that we move on from them. No big deal, but it's part of our story, correct. Whatever it is. And it's traumatic. And like you said, 70% of humans will experience as an adult, by the time they're 70% will experience trauma.
Yeah. And that was before 2020. That was before.
Yeah. I think that's counted up post-COVID.
Correct.
For
Correct.
Sure.
Yeah.
So, and define trauma for us.
Yeah, so I'm having to try to find academic ways of defining it with my PhD, but keeping it simple. It's a distressing or disturbing event. It's something that you've found distressing, and they try to, categorize it into two. Some it's complex, meaning that it's kind of been either small, acute, or even sometimes some complex building up. And then you've got the shock trauma, which is like the accident or, something that just happens immediately that you're unaware of. And sometimes a shock trauma can begin with, diagnosis of a terminal illness. But then that could build up over time if you've, say, been living with that diagnosis for 10 years. And once again, we are just kind of like fly kicked into the world to just keep on living without any real, care, real care for how do we manage this distressing event.
Well, we shove it down, of course.
Yeah,
Isn't that what
we do.
Like, we don't know what to do with it, but or we go out and then we get, the EMDR or, we do get help. But I oftentimes find even with EMDR, sometimes it's still, there's remnants of it that stick around, What have you found that works really well for trauma?
Oh, so I'm looking at traditional modalities, and even though I'm still very early into my research, things I've investigated so far take me back to traditional methods. I find tapping, some people call it emotional freedom technique or tapping. Yeah. So I find that extremely great. However, I think there is something in patterns and rhythms that works for me. Yeah. It's the reason people talk about, when you go back to slavery, the reason why you heard a lot of humming, like why there was a lot of singing. Yeah. It's also the vibration that goes in the body. So there's something in, for me, humming as well. Like I find myself, is it Matilda? Is it, I find myself doing that. When I'm like triggered in a place, I find myself doing that. And once again, it's not like I've gone to a therapist or a healer. That just feels innate. And I say it in my TED talk, and it's in the books, The Body Keeps the Score. I think there's so much wisdom in our own bodies that we have not even connected with. So for me, it's EFT tapping. And I do Reiki. I do love energetic healing, but then I also love good talk therapy. I love my therapist asking me questions, and then my mind just going, oh, that's why I do that, or that's not working for me. So yeah, a mix.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. I know for myself, I have a big singing bowl, actually, that a lot of the people in my Facebook group purchased for me. It was a surprise. It was beautiful. It was huge,
wonderful.
Though. Huge. And they gave it to me at a workshop a few years ago. I use that thing every day. The tone, it activates the Zeal chakra, which is the mouth of God, the voice of God. It is, I didn't even know there was a Zeal chakra. It's back here. Anyway, I will go, if I'm not feeling well or like emotionally off, I will just start my singing bowl, and then I chant Om. It is, I can feel the vibration in my whole body. It changes my emotional and mental state like within a minute or two. Again, I'm not saying, again, I really do agree with what you're saying as far as, we need to start trusting ourselves. We're very good, and we are in a world where you're sick, you go to the doctor. So your energy goes outside of self, and you go outside instead of bringing the energy back and saying, wait, let me tune into myself. What do I need? And it might mean I need to tap, or I go to EMDR, or I get therapy, but it also might mean I need to chant. I need to hum. I love humming too. I find I just did a 1 week intensive. I was teaching I have a coaching program, and I was teaching coaches, and I found myself as I've got the mic and I'm rocking.
Yeah.
I'm like leaning back and forth. My nervous system just likes that. It's very relaxing. And it just brings me back into balance. I just naturally do that. So,
oh my gosh,
we need to attune to ourselves so that we know what we need, and we will be intuitively guided when we tune into self. So,
what you just said, can you just put it into a bottle? Because for some reason we like buying bottles, and just put it into a bottle and put it on the shelf. And I say that with so much love. I think I wonder why I get excited when I have these conversations, because this is the work I want to do. When you find something really good and you just want everyone to have it.
Yes,
you couldn't.
100%. I do agree. Yeah. So you say trauma is not transformed, it's transferred.
So if it's not transformed,
excuse me, I didn't read the whole sentence. If it's not transformed, it's transferred. And so to children, to offspring, to other people in the family. Talk about a little bit. That was in your documentary, I believe. Talk about that a little bit.
So this is, I find different analogies really almost every day. When we don't acknowledge or make the choice to even look at our trauma and then work on it, to transform it into either something beautiful, something positive, what happens is either subtly, consciously or subconsciously, it's transferred. And like you said, it can be to family, it can be to work colleagues. So you think about, you go into work and you're on a project and someone just blows off the handle. Trust me, there is something underlying from a trauma perspective that they think has to do with the work experience, but has nothing to do with it. It's probably something from childhood, but it's so buried, they can't even find the trace anymore. That's one form of transference. I think another form is if, say, you had habits, say something, people usually say, why does this keep on happening? You see patterns, and we need to give more self-compassion. But if you have a pattern, your kids pick it up. Sometimes they pick it up and almost can take the same one. But here's the transference that blew my mind. a couple of years ago, my teenage daughter, was struggling. There was, and I think I'm quite open to say, I already feel the vibe, and I think we need to be more honest, and I have her permission.
Yeah.
There was self-harm involved in the challenges she was having.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember seeing some of the scars, but what happened was I left my body when I saw it. I disassociated. I completely left my body, was supporting her, but I was not present. Mm-hmm. And I remember when we went to the psychologist, he said, the one who was seeing my daughter said, I think you need to go see someone. Because what had happened was 7-year-old Yemi came back. Of course. She could not deal with it. And I had to leave. And I'm not talking physically. I was still there, but was not there, if you know what I mean. Yeah. That's another form of transference. It's not even the same trauma. It's completely different. Yeah. Yet my inability to handle that or stay in my body was big. And that blew my mind, that transference does not mean the same thing.
No, I get that for sure. Let's talk about bending your reality. That sounds really cool.
It does. You put bending reality, and I think the scene from The Matrix of spoon you bent comes up.
Yeah.
Probably not that in its physical embodiment. For me, bending reality is almost removing yourself from the reality that we all appear to live in. Yeah. I use it in the term of, honestly, Michelle, what's a South London girl who grew up in Nigeria doing in Australia, having the audacity to open up a business when there's debt as a single parent going through divorce? And I don't say this as this is a really great story. 100%, I've bent reality time and time again. And for me, it means not signing up for what we have been told is the only way to be. It's not a gimmick. It's kind of like another way of saying, are you going to challenge the status quo? But people think status quo just means, the gender conversation, the race conversation. No, the status quo says the 9-to-5 job. The status quo says that to be a complete family, it needs to be that mum and that dad. And then, we're not going that far back. The fact that we think we don't need villages anymore, or people to call on to ask for things, or the fact that someone thinks the only way to buy a business or buy something is with money. It's completely not dismantling, just deconstructing reality as we see it and testing it to its limits. But it all depends on the mindset, just like that little boy or girl says on Matrix, which is their mind just bending it. And I say that, and then I start to get into the details of exactly what it is I needed to do. For instance, opening my gym in London while in Australia was bending reality. That was mad. That was mad.
I love this. So I've again like 20 questions all at once. So what I'm realizing, to bend the reality is really not follow any sort of social, cultural, any sort of norms. It's following what now, let me ask you this. Did it feel right? What led you to open up the gym in London when you're living in Australia?
Yeah, did it feel right? You see, on paper, it didn't feel right. In my body, it did. And so that's the conflict. Yeah. The conflict, and part of your skill of bending reality is trying to synthesize the both, which is, oh my gosh, this is crazy. People are saying, why are you doing it? My mum who's in London, why are you doing it? So it's trying to understand why and where that comes from. So did it feel scary? Absolutely. But I had to sit down, and that was it, and ask myself, Yemi, what are you scared of? And, reading Napoleon Hill, which I purely read because I try to understand how a world that was dominated by men was built on wealth, but the book barely talks about money. The bit I love the most is talking about the different fears. The bending reality for me is beginning to learn how to dance with the fear of criticism.
Oh, that's good. Hold on. Say it again. I got to take that. I got to let that land, honey.
I can't remember what I said, but this is what I think I was trying to say.
Fear of criticism.
Of criticism. Yeah. That's for me a big attribute of bending reality, because the fear of criticism tends to be one of our biggest fears for some reason. And once again, during my investigation, apparently, back in the day, like if we can remember all our ancestors, where we came from, if you did wrong, you were thrown out of the community. And that leads to major isolation, which is why a lot of us have struggled with recent isolation. So the fear of criticism is almost valid, but it's how can you dance with that? How can you dance with the fact that you are not going to do things the normal way, the real way, the status quo way? And then the minute I got comfortable with that, you know, my snapback, as my psychologist says it, my snapback when people say, why are you doing this, is no longer loaded. There's no longer this long story to explain why I'm doing what I'm doing. I had to go through a lot of things to get that. Opening the gym was really tough because there's a part of me that didn't believe I should be doing that. So I had to remove myself from reality and say, Yemi, pretend you were not in this version of reality and you were somebody else. Who would you need to be to make it happen? I almost, you know, when you
that's
create,
good. Who would you need to be to make this happen?
Make it happen. Correct.
Love that. Okay.
And that's a big part of bending realities that, you know, I look at my daughter playing whatever they call it, Fortnite on Xbox. They create these personas, these, you know, pseudo, like that's what you do to bend reality. Even if you just kind of did it as a joke and said, there's actually another dimension in which I can make this happen.
Oh, I love that. And it's so true. But the ego really puts us in these boxes and says, no, you have to do it this way. You can't afford that. Why would you do that? And again, you've got your mother coming at you. You've got everyone, you know, criticizing you, thinking you're crazy, but your heart and your body said, do it.
Yes.
And you do. It's like you're jumping in another dimension and doing it.
Correct.
And it worked out well. Correct.
It did. It got opened up, and trust, it got opened up, had someone manage it. And as of yesterday, I've literally just resigned as director for that. And it's been a full circle moment. And you know, I'm changing my story again. So I definitely want to change my bio. I'm changing my story again, but absolutely somebody else has taken over it. He's been managing it day to day in the past couple of years. And it was the biggest test of bending reality. And I think I'm pretty confident I've applied it to a few other things, some that have succeeded and some that haven't. But that's the beauty. I'm comfortable with failing.
So this is, you know, it's like, it sounds like it's radical change. It's really, you know, people, excuse me, when people don't like their lives, you can't expect life to show up differently. You have to have radical change, meaning you do things that are radically different than what you've been doing and how you've been showing up for all these years.
Yes.
That's how you create the reality that you really want, the reality that brings you joy, the reality that says, that makes you really, that you can live with so much peace and happiness every single day. It's radical change that we need. And I like this. And you do that by bending this reality. So what does empty your cup mean? You have these steps, these 4 steps.
Oh gosh, you're gonna have to remind me what those steps are.
Empty my cup.
Yes. So I see what. Yes, I definitely don't know all from memory. So let me go to emptying cup.
Yeah.
Because it's, and I think this is where most of us, humans get confused. Because there's a bit of you need to fill your cup before you can help anyone else, and I believe that. So let's not confuse it with that.
Yeah.
I do believe you fill your cup. Especially to go out and do things if you need the energy to create things. Emptying your cup is a case of, if you need to learn or want to learn, how can you learn if your cup is already full? How can you pick anything up? How can you transform? So emptying your cup starts from there, with the view that you need to suspend disbelief. Meaning that the minute you hear yourself saying, I would never do that, the words never should be some sort of alarm bell. Like, I don't know, it should just be, say, someone like clanging that singing bowl to remind you that you absolutely overfilled your cup and you're not going to learn anything. That's the biggest part of emptying your cup and suspending disbelief. And that really is one of the key things in it, because when you do that, you can learn so much more. There are things that I definitely have said never. I remember saying I would never have my kids, who have 2 different dads, where I carried a lot of shame for. I would never let them live separately. And that's exactly what's happened over the past year and a half. And their individual growth has been amazing. And that's because they needed to spend time with their dads. But I couldn't have done that if my cup was too full and I was not willing to hear another version or try another
Ooh,
version.
that's good. So you really do have to be open.
Yes, like open, open to the point of potential discomfort.
Yeah.
That's the big thing. It's open to the point that you are uncomfortable, but not to the point that you're broken.
Yeah. How do you know that you're doing the right thing? How do you know that you're doing the right thing?
There was something you said, and you said it earlier, and it just felt so right. We have to learn to go back to our internal navigation system. It's really important to understand how our body works, understand how our mind works. And I think once you reconnect with yourself, and maybe that's doing some of those activities we were talking about, you kind of know, firstly, if you think you're going in the right direction, and that you'll be okay even if you're not. Those have got to be the two things. Like this, leaving the director role of my gym in F45 Brixton has been agonizing. And it's been agonizing over a number of years. But I think in the last couple of weeks it was. And I was really struggling with, have I or am I doing the right thing? Those are the questions. But I've had to tap into my body and remember that I'm now at a place that I'm looking for peace and integrity. And my identity is not tied to that. And even if it was, I could recreate.
And that's where we get tripped up. My identity is not tied to that. So when you remove the identity and how we're tied to things, or how the ego is tied to things, right? Is that how you decided to turn that over and step away?
Yeah, it really was. In 2020, when things started to get difficult, I really started to push harder to then part sell my gym. And I remember speaking to my coach, and it turned out that my nervousness of selling it was that I still had imposter syndrome, that even though I'd opened it, that it was a fluke. And I was worried that in selling it, I might not create such great stuff again. But until I'd started to dig, I was ready to move on. I am ready to move on. But there's still this thing of, but people know you as the Yemi who came back into an area that was becoming gentrified in London and opened up the gym. If you do that, then you have nothing. Who are you? But that's not that. That's the risk. And I've got my little pointy finger out here. That's the risk. It's when we tie our material possessions to our identity. And then if and when that goes, we feel completely lost. I don't want that, Michelle. I really don't. No. I want to be happy regardless of what I've got. So I think, if we all did that, even if that was an action for listeners, is just check what your identity is with and without those material possessions.
That's hard because our ego really does cling to that our identity, right?
Yes.
It says this is who I am. And if you don't have that, if I'm not doing this, then who am I? And that's terrifying. So we hang on. The next thing you talk about is changing your environment. You say, as Einstein shared, we cannot solve a problem with the same mindset that created it.
Yes. I think that's why I moved to Australia. I couldn't have gone anywhere further.
That's so true.
In all seriousness, I definitely don't think everybody needs to leave their country, but without realizing it, I'm one of those people that can't operate if my environment is messy. And so that's why understanding who you are is really important. So if problems, traumas were created and triggered in a messy environment, one of the last things you want to do is live in a messy environment. You almost need to move to a clean. And I'm just using these words, just for reference. Right. Some people might need to move out of the home if that's where trauma happened. Some people might need to move out of the suburb. All you got to do sometimes is move out of the suburb. So those are the physical things that can actually, so that's when the environment starts to co-conspire with you to recreate a new version of you. But then there's other things you can do with your mind. I have been tested. It's coming up to 8 years I've been in Australia. I love my family dearly. I do think there were some things that I need to take responsibility of myself, did that weren't necessarily helpful, that were toxic. I remember, when you do the jokes against another family member, or, You seem to constantly find what they're doing wrong with no praise whatsoever. I was definitely one of those. So when I go back home, I find myself back in that environment again.
Right.
And it's quite interesting. I'm triggered to join the conversation. If my mind is stronger, I would know not to be involved in that because that no longer aligns with my integrity and who I am.
Mm-hmm.
But my mind has had to be the change of environment. And I'll tell you, year one, I couldn't do it. Year two, it's taken almost 6 years for my mind to now be a safe ground, that it doesn't matter if I'm around other elements of toxicity, I can still survive and thrive. So yeah,
Awesome. I love it. You talk about an alibi. Find out who and what your alibis are, then get rid of them. It's likely they're holding you back.
Your alibis are your excuses.
Yeah, right? Talk about the alibis.
Alibis. And the reason why I love alibis, once again, got them from Napoleon Hill, is because it sounds friendly. We think it's saving us. You know, you get an alibi when you've been taken to court and you want to try and get off.
Yeah.
And that's why, so because excuses sounds harsh. The minute you say, oh, those sound like excuses, we tend to have our backup. It's like, are you saying I'm not good enough? The alibis is something we have created that is so friendly to the point that we say we can't do anything. So, you know, and there's a thin line between not beating yourself up. Like I used to, and actually I think I'm using the alibi at the moment, that the month of March has been so busy. I've been speaking at a number of engagements. I can't make it to the gym. So my alibi has been my speaking engagements. And it's extremely wonderful and I guess valid because I'm giving stuff, but I know I can. I've done it before. Like I can create it. So just check on those really soothing alibis, which, you know, they are wonderful in their own right, but are they holding you back?
Yeah, they're keeping you stuck.
Correct. So worth checking and confirming that, they're not the wrong alibis that send you down the wrong road.
I like that. And then you have a bending reality formula. Manifestation equals intuition minus fear of stepping out of the comfort zone. Talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, I'm a formulas girl. I'm definitely a formulas girl. I mean, manifestation, you know, I don't even know, like back in the day, people would use the term woo-woo. And I think woo-woo was even used with the view of something derogatory. And let's just say we can find another name, you know, manifestation, law of attraction, that the scientists of the world were saying the same thing.
Right.
You know, we've socialized it and we've ridiculed it. But considering we place so much emphasis on science, and for me as an engineer, this is my, you know, first profession, I believe it 100%. So to bend reality is actually tapping into the science that every single one of us has, which is to think about, have desires for things we want, get out of the way, and that can become your manifestation personal formula. But that on its own should work, but we're still operating from this 2 million-year-old brain of fearing things. And that's where the fear comes out. We have to subtract the fear from that innate power we have that most of us have forgotten. Yeah. And that for me is how you bend reality. And there's so many other intricacies. You know, we spoke about the fact that removing yourself from what you think here is real, you need to tap into that magic. But I've kept magic out of the formula just so I don't lose anyone too quickly. So manifestation, which is just your own innate scientific magical power of having desires, getting out of the way, making them happen. But then look at the fear. What fear? Is it fear of poverty? Is it fear of death? Is it fear of illness? Fear of a loved one? Figure out which fear dominates you and work on subtracting it from your manifestation exercise.
How do you subtract it from your manifestation? What do you do with fear when you have fear that's popping up for you?
Well, I learned from, and I heard this first from Tony Robbins. I know, very little knowledge is new knowledge, so it may have come from somewhere else as well. It's what he calls taking it for a dance. You know, I think similar to imposter syndrome, we think we can just get rid of it, but we have some of the greatest people, is it Seth Godin and Maya Angelou? They share very openly their imposter syndrome. You just learn to get down the imposter syndrome ladder a lot quicker. Similar with fear, you just learn to dance with it. So when I have a fear going on stage and I find myself constantly running back and forth to the bathroom or not being able to concentrate or sweating. I genuinely just start rocking my body and take it for a dance. And then I get on stage and actually tell people I'm nervous. So I'm letting fear know that it's not going to stop me. I'm going to let it out, but you have to find your own unique way. So first acknowledge, we take it for a dance. How do you dance? And that's how you do it. But you first have to acknowledge it. You have to acknowledge that this fear is here. When we say, oh no, I'm fine, no problem, it starts creating havoc.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Thich Nhat Hanh said, I don't know, I heard him on Oprah probably whenever Oprah was on 25 years ago. She had him on way back when, and he said, invite whatever, fill in the blank to tea. So in this case, it would be invite your fear to tea.
Yes.
You have to get to know these parts that are popping up.
You do.
Because like you said, we can't, we can push them away. We pretend like they're not there, but they're there, and they get louder and bigger when we try to avoid them and not look at them. It's like we want to put them right in front of us and go, all right, what do you want me to know?
Yes.
What are you trying to do? I want to hear from you. You got to get to know it, or it's going to be loud and in the way.
Can you imagine just doing like a group gathering where we brought our fears and we actually just spent, I don't know, a couple of hours just looking at it? I think it would change how we show up in the world.
Oh, really, for sure. Yeah. And this really ties right back into, in the beginning, we were talking about owning your story and really sharing, who we are with the world. And again, I don't mean you have to put it out on Facebook or anything like that, but if you're in a group, sharing who you are and being open and vulnerable with people that are your friends or close people in your life, I mean, it's powerful, even if they're not your friends. When I do a live event, one of the things that we do is we get in smaller groups and we share after I'm on stage, of course, sharing my whole story. I'm like, whatever, it's empowering to share your story. It's not disempowering, because what's someone going to say? It's like, I already know everything that happened. You can't say anything that's going to hurt me. I already walked that whole journey. I know my story.
Yes.
But you know what I mean? Like, what are you going to say? Okay, that was terrible. Yeah, I know. Okay, moving on. Okay. So in my live events, oftentimes I'll have people get in small groups and I invite them to share their stories. Anything they want to say that they have not been able to say to someone else.
Yes.
It is, oh my gosh, so powerful. So powerful.
And I love that you create that space. I put a post, and I just want to get the right name of the person. Apparently, Anne Voskamp. Shame dies when stories are told in safe spaces.
Ooh, who wrote that?
Her name, I'm assuming it's her. Yeah, Anne Voskamp.
Anne Voskamp. Ooh, that's beautiful.
Yeah. Shame dies when stories are told in safe spaces. Because I do think shame has a lot to do with why we don't tell our stories.
Yeah, because
and
we
it
think
just
we're
sounds
the only
like
ones.
Correct.
We're the only ones that have this. And I just did again. I just came off of doing a group for our coaches, and every single time I hear this over and over and over again, people say, I thought it was just me that had fill in the blank. The abusive husband, the abusive wife, the partner that was whatever, the father that did this, it's like, no, you're not. And when we realize, what?
How did we get there? There are billions of us in the world. How have we become so individualized that we realize we're not alone?
I think it's the ego. It always goes back to the ego. The ego says I'm alone. The ego says I'm an individual and I'm separate from you.
Yeah.
It's the illusion of separateness instead of that we're all part of a beautiful oneness. And again, it makes us feel like like we're all alone. So therefore, then the shame's going to come up and says, don't you dare say that to anybody, because you'll get kicked out of the tribe, of course. And if we're kicked out of the tribe, then God only knows we'll get killed, right? So don't say that. But it brings tears every time we do this in a live event. And people always say this, like, I really thought it was just me that felt like I'm an imposter, I'm a whatever. No. So it's comforting, This is really beautiful. I love this. So this is how we change our reality. And gosh, your story is so beautiful. I encourage people to watch. You have 3 documentaries.
Well, I've got 3, but the third one I'm currently trying to commission with a broadcasting station. So there are 2 out that are on YouTube, and I've put out for people to see.
So
and it's different perspective.
Talk about what they're about. Just give people a little idea.
Yeah. So the first one was about trauma. The first one was following my book. I found once again, everyone's like, oh, I know someone who went through that. It was once again, they wanted someone to share their story so that they had permission.
Yeah.
And then it centered around the trauma thing. And so I wanted to just explore my own, and I wanted to do a documentary. And the producer said, typically documentaries are exploring something, but the question has got to be not provocative, but really kind of gets you thinking. And the question I really wanted to know is, did I choose my trauma? And to lots of people that can throw you off, but I'm no longer thrown off by questions, especially if I pose it. For me, it's the power when I pose it. And so that's what the first one is called, Did I Choose My Trauma? Which is just an exploration of, well, firstly, you get the answer there very quickly, whether I think I chose it or not. And just to spoil it a bit, in the physical realm, absolutely not. But it was whether I choose to transform it, not the trauma. It's whether I choose to transform it. And so that's eventually where that question leads to. And the second one, which is the series I really want to get on the Netflixes of the world, is Cleaning Our Trauma. Cleaning our trauma means we just make the choice to just look at it. And I'm thinking, let's just take this one bite size at a time. If we all took responsibility for what we went through, not responsibility for it happening to us, but experiencing that we are the experiencer, we are the person who experienced it, will we make the choice to just clean it? That doesn't have to be full on healing. And we talk about people's stories and the kind of things they did. And then I have therapy, traditional, non-traditional, just share ways in which you can do that.
Oh, beautiful. Oh, that's beautiful. Well, we'll add those to our show notes. And of course, your book, we'll add that to the show notes as well.
Thank you.
Got a lot on Yemi Penn.
I'm trying to reduce it for this year, Michelle. So if I message you on Instagram and say, oh my gosh, I've started a new business, say, don't do it. Don't do it. Just sleep.
I'll tell you, don't do it.
Please.
Don't do it. No, I like it because you're bending reality, because, most people would say, just have one business, just do you're doing what you feel called to do. So I might encourage you. I don't know. We'll see.
Okay. You're a good and bad influence. I'll take it.
I don't want you to be exhausted, but I do want you to know your heart. And if your heart's telling you to do it, then go for it.
Okay. Oh, I like you. You're my peoples.
Yes. Anything else you want to share with people?
I for some reason, every time I'm asked that, the first thing that comes to mind is the book by Tarana Burke and Brene Brown. Okay. You are your best. It's completely gone blank. But Tarana Burke and Brene Brown, you are your best thing. That's it.
Ooh.
It's so simple, and you can interpret it the way you want.
Okay.
I know we look out for a lot of things, but please don't forget to look in. I promise you the wisdom is in there. They know what you need. So that would be my last note.
I love that. Thank you. Thank you so much for being on today.
Thank you so much for having me.
It's a pleasure to get to talk to you and get to know you.
Thank you.